Thank you guys so much for showing up here this evening. I have been waiting for this opportunity for 20 years, 19 years, to be able to tell this story. And only now, there is the right time, apparently. So I'm very grateful you're here, and I'm very grateful that Laura gave me that opportunity. And before I get into the story, I would like to explain a little bit about myself. Some of you already know me a little bit. Some of you know that I have this book, which was published in 2018, and this is about my experience of Kundalini rising that went all the way through. I don't know if you know about Kundalini rising, but the story that I have is that I didn't know anything about Kundalini. I didn't know the word. I didn't believe in chakras. I didn't think that spiritual enlightenment was anything specific. It was kind of vague, and I wasn't even looking for it because it was not something I contemplated very often. I was working on my artwork. I'm a painter and living in LA. And because of my personal life situation and because of my art situation at the time, I became depressed. Eventually, a few months later, I was suicidal. And that one day, when I thought I was going to commit suicide, I was ready to do it. Everything looked like that's what was going to happen. At that moment, I had that experience. And it changed my life completely. And the reason why I'm bringing it up today is because like many of us, maybe some of you here, know about our psychic, or at least a little bit or a lot, or know a lot about being psychic. I had a little bit of psychic experiences throughout my life, but on one hand, they were too rare to really worry too much about it. On the other hand, whenever they were happening, they were a little scary because I didn't know where they were coming from. But after my experience, I ended up on Hawaii, on Maui. And I just suddenly ended up there. From LA, I was somewhat catapulted over to Maui and lived there for 2 years. And I didn't know to what extent my psychic abilities at that time were developed, because although I could feel what people were thinking and feeling, that was something relatively clear to me at the time when it was happening. I didn't really think about psychic things too much. I just ended up on Hawaii, and one day a couple of friends of mine and I, we heard that there is a psychic person visiting from the Big Island, and that if we would like to, we could go. It's on the beach in Kihei, one side of Maui. There are big grass fields there. Just the beach is like a big grass field. It's wonderful. There are trees here and there. So anyway, we went to, under the pretext actually of going to see the psychic person whose name was Rainbow. I didn't know if it was a man or a woman. We went there, and that huge field was sitting we sat in one place, and there are groups of people sitting all over. And in the distance, I see a lot of people here, a lot of people there, smaller groups, etc. And we're just, honestly, I forgot about the psychic person. We're just sitting, having lunch, talking. After a while, I just looked around. I stood up and looked around. This was maybe the 3rd or 4th month on Maui for me. So I just looked around. And suddenly, I see in the distance this beautiful blue tent. Just huge blue dome. Just almost shining blue color. And I'm wondering, wow, how fast they build it up. I had no idea. I didn't see it. Like 15 minutes ago, I didn't see it. Wondering, what is it? And so I was curious and I wanted to go there. So I asked my friends, I said, hey guys, you want to go and see that big blue dome there? And everybody's looking where I'm showing and looking at me and going, what? What blue dome? Well, apparently nobody else saw it. So I realized that they didn't see it. I go, well, I asked some couple of friends to come with me. So we walking there, and as we walking there, I already knew that they don't see it. But I see this blue dome, beautiful, rich, blue color, transparent dome. And the closer we're getting, I see little rainbows flying inside. Just little, like little rainbow, little ribbons of rainbows flying. And still, none of my friends saw it. So I just keep quiet. And finally, we got closer and closer to that place where that blue dome was. As we got really close, I couldn't see it anymore. But in front of me was sitting this lady. So I knew that was the rainbow person. She had her little card saying the psychic readings from Rainbow. And so I said, well, I just saw this blue dome and these little rainbows flying around. So I knew it was you. And she goes, oh, God bless you. So from that, I realized that since my experience happened, a lot has changed. And so some of us have the psychic abilities naturally, and we can see things or hear things, connect with other beings telepathically or through actual sound. We can hear them talk. And some of us can develop them if we want to, can develop those abilities. What I teach all of the chakras as dimensions of perception, and the throat chakra as the 5th dimension. This is my understanding that I gained from my experience when, at the time when the experience started, it began with a rainbow tube of light. Looked like it was coming out of me, and it terrified me because I've never heard about anything like that or seen anything like it. So it was science fiction for me in reality, and I got very, very scared, and I wanted to run away, but I realized that the rainbow was a part of me. I couldn't detach myself from it. And as the experience progressed, I was able to see that my consciousness was moving through different dimensions. Later on, I was able to put it together, connect the dots, and while I read about Kundalini rising experience, about chakras and about subtle body, I realized that in my experience, my consciousness, which I call Kundalini. Kundalini is our individual unit of consciousness. So my individual unit of consciousness was traveling through these different worlds. We have chakras that you can say we have, but it's actually the way it really is. We are spiritual beings that are the individual unit of consciousness. Each of us is individual unit of consciousness. A spirit by itself has no form, has no body, has no expression. But spirit has three qualities. Once it creates the subtle body and the body. The body's physical body is created out of the subtle body. The subtle body, is Kundalini, individual unit of consciousness, and in the case of our singular being, we just focus on the first 7 chakras, the major chakras. And as we live through our lives, we are a fusion of what our chakras are able to get, to get from each of the dimensions. The dimensions are always there. And this is what I'm teaching. It's completely new. No one else has done it before. We do operate with the chakras as dimensions of perception. So as my consciousness was moving up during the Kundalini rising, I could perceive each of these dimensions one after another. And it so happens that the 5th one is the psychic dimension. This is where through the sound, and it often is a blue color as well, we can tap into that world. That world is always there. And some of us have ability to tap into it naturally. All of us can cultivate the 5th chakra in order to develop it and develop our psychic abilities. So, knowing that much, I still was living in Los Angeles. Actually, I moved back from Hawaii to LA, and quickly, I couldn't live there anymore. It was almost downtown LA. There was helicopters above my head looking for heroin dealers, and it wasn't the right place for me to be. And I moved here because I wanted to ski. So I moved here, and I became a ski bum. I needed time to still go through all that incredible change that happened, all that transformation. And I needed time to gain a spiritual practice that would be very consistent and that would allow me to focus my mind really well. I teach about that too. I teach how to control our emotions and how to focus the mind. So these 2 chakras, the emotional and the mental, are not congested like it is usually in our daily life. Things happen and we constantly have the 2nd and the 3rd chakra full of stuff, full of emotions, full of thoughts. Hardly ever there is a chance to release that charge. And if that charge is released, Kundalini energy by itself will want to move up. Because this is a lonely place for it. This is when we feel that we are separated from all that is. because here, in between the first and the second chakra, Kundalini is asleep. Our individual unit of consciousness is not awakened because we are focusing on the first three. In our daily life, we always focus on our first three: material, emotional, and mental world. But we are much more than that, of course. Science doesn't know it, so we have to find a way to explain it to ourselves so we know better, because science is only talking about the third chakra. And third chakra is the linear, logical thinking. So anything that happens that's wild and crazy, science will have an explanation for it, or will try to have an explanation that's very logical. Even if it's about quantum physics and talking about electrons jumping and moving in two directions at the same time, it's still a description of something happening in time, even if science questions time. Here, the upper dimensions, in the true structure of our subtle body, these dimensions don't work in time. There is no time. The psychic cognition comes in a timeless way, especially from here, intuition and vision. When we know something, we know it instantly. It's not like we are trying to get there step by step like logical thinking will do. So, anyway, let me have a sip of water. And I'll get to the real story here. Because, as I said, I became obsessed about skiing. I did anything I could just to keep on skiing. And it was 1996, my second year here, although I still had my studio in LA, so I would come here every now and then, especially in winter, and ski. I didn't have my own place. I stayed at my friend's Ralph's place. And one day, it was the 23rd of April, I remember, Sunday. A lot of snow fell. Suddenly you had extra 3 feet of snow. And it was a beautiful sunny day. We went skiing to Mount Rose ski resort. And I had a snowboard. That was my first snowboard, and I could barely snowboard. I really couldn't snowboard. And I could ski fine, but I couldn't snowboard. But I had a snowboard with me, and I had a lightweight jacket that was actually a sailing jacket, and it didn't have zipped pockets. So we got to the lodge, and lots of people on the deck talking. We're saying hello, and Ralph goes, "Oh, why don't you get some drinks here?" And he gives me his silver dollar money clip with 6 bills of $100 in it, or 7. I think 7, or something like that. I take it, I get the drinks, I go back to the tables, we all drink, we all talk, and then we all go skiing, and Ralph went his way skiing, and the whole time, few hours, I was all over the place. For snowboarding, you don't need to have a steep slope. You can try everywhere. And I learned later that there are 43 runs on the mountain. I didn't do all 43, but I did plenty. And I was all over the place, and I was falling everywhere. So I was rolling here and there, and I remember the biggest fall I had was on the slide side, on the east side, East Bowl. I remember I made a big dent there in the snow. Anyway, the day ended and we're back in the lodge, and Ralph goes, "Oh, I'm so thirsty. Let's just drink something. You have the money." Money? I forgot all about that $600 bills and the money, silver dollar money clip that Ralph got from his dad for good luck when he was 13. So it was a special gift. On top of it, a friend of mine came down at that time, and I was going to go to stay up the lake that evening. So there were three of us. It was Ralph, my friend Steve, and me. We've learned that I lost the money. And where is the money? It was even a crazy question, because I was all over there. I fell in pretty much, I remember I fell in many places, and I didn't have the money, and we all felt bad. And this is when something strange happened. We were sitting together at the table in the lodge, and suddenly something came on me. Like, I just had this strong idea that I want to go and get the money. I want to go and get it. And I looked at Ralph and looked at Steve, and at the same time, they both said, "Let's go and get it." So it was after the resort was closed. It was about probably 4:30. It was April, so it was still light. Ralph took us. We first left one car. We had two cars. We left one car on the East Bowl, and we drove to the summit of Mount Rose in Ralph's car. Ralph let us go, and we were hiking, and it was up till here, hiking to the summit of Slide Mountain. And by then, I didn't have the inspiration anymore. By then I was mad, because it was terrible. It was hiking in that snow, and I was yelling and screaming. I was going, "What are we doing? This is crazy. It's not possible to find, it's crazy. Let's not do this." But Steve was way ahead, and finally we ended up on top. It was right around sunset. It was getting colder, so the snow was getting a little crusty, and we decided to go. So I knew that one place where I fell, and for sure I thought, if anywhere, the money would be there. So I snowboarded all the way down there. On the way looking, of course, it just seemed insane to look in 3 feet of new snow. And there were so many people skiing that day. It was Sunday. I think it was one of the last days, probably the last day of the season. How did we want to look for that money? I just couldn't believe it. Anyway, I got all the way down to the area where I fell, sort of almost, not very close to the lift, but just kind of on the way when it was already rather flat. And so I'm sitting there. My friend is nowhere. I don't know where he went, and I'm sitting not too happy, because I know that we made this trip, but that was very nice. But how we could have found the money, I don't know. And suddenly, there I see him. Steve is coming down. Those years, the 1996, the really wide ski pants were fashionable. So he comes down, and he has this big pants, and he goes, "Oh, look, I found beer!" And he pulls this big bottle, huge bottle of beer out of his pocket. He goes, "Yeah, I found some beer." Somebody stashed it. This is typical. So he found it, and I'm like, oh yeah, okay. But the money is not here. I didn't find it. It's not here. And Steve goes, oh, because it's here. And he takes out the $600 bills and the money clip, the silver dollar money clip. And when I saw it, my hair stood up on my head. And I looked, and the sky was this dark periwinkle color and the first stars showing. And it was, all I could do, I was just thinking to whoever it was not something that I thought possible. And I asked him, well, where did you find it? He found it on a silver dollar run. And I never fell there. I never fell there. So I just was speechless about this. I just remember this as something that I couldn't explain, but there was already a sense of understanding that there is something going on. Since then, for the next couple of years, was 1996, yeah, a couple of years, I learned to tune into the mountain much better, and I realized that the trees in the ski resort and in that area, the Mount Rose Wilderness, when I tuned into looking around in the trees, I could feel that there were spirits wrapped around the trees. They were there, and I could feel them. And of course, this is not something that I be trying to do by force. I'm not really, don't call myself psychic, and I don't really practice it. But when it happens, it happens. When it happens, I can tell that it's there. So I already knew that about that incident with finding that money. And then the spirits wrapped around, and so I just let it be, happy about it, that there was some kind of connection I felt. And then it was 2 years later when, in February, I think February 1998, I was at that time studying in TMCC, computer graphics, and I went skiing one day to Mount Rose. I lived at that time on Skyline Boulevard. I was maybe 40 minutes for me to get to Mount Rose. I had limited time because I knew that I had to study. And computer graphics was just the beginning of computer graphics. And it was challenging for me. I had an exam coming up. So I was kind of focused, sitting on the lift and thinking about what I need to learn and thinking about all that. And it was a foggy day. The fog, the cloud maybe was right on top of Slide Mountain. And I came up to the top of the chairlift and got off the chairlift. And to the left, if you go to the left, there are several easy runs there. And to get to them, it's a very slight decline. It's just it's easy to ski that area. You just do it without thinking. So I'm on that way, moving down slowly, and it's all in the fog, a little bit in the fog. When suddenly I feel that I cannot move on. I can't move. I'm just stuck. And it seems impossible. It seems like I should be just going. I'm standing right there and I can't move. So, and there was no one there at that day. There was almost no people skiing. So I don't know if I even saw anyone passing me, but I'm just standing, wondering what's going on. Why can't I move? And after maybe a minute of standing like this, trying to figure out what was going on, I suddenly saw it. They were all standing in front of me. And this is the center of the story. In front of me, there were figures wrapped in gray blankets. In front of them was someone who looked like a chief of the village, and the rest looked like the members of the village. There were women with children, and I don't know how many people there were, because it looked like there were more behind them, but just right in front of me I saw maybe 10, 15 people max. And they were there right in front of me, and I was standing wondering why, listening, waiting. And they were there in a very sad state. It looked like they were mourning. And I was silent. I was just looking at that scene right in front of me, not knowing what to think, not knowing what to say. I was just waiting for them to keep on explaining to me. And suddenly, I realized that I'm connected with them, and at the same time, they're letting me go slowly. And as I was slowly moving, the whole image came, what they presented to me. It was an image of a fire, of a whole village burning, and a massacre happening. And as I was skiing down, I didn't stop. I was just skiing down. I wasn't skiing fast. Throughout that whole run down, I had the images of that terrible thing happening right in front of me. I was there. And the final message was that no one survived, that everyone was murdered. By the time I got down to the bottom of the mountain, to the lift, I was in tears. I couldn't stop crying, and I had the whole scene. I got it. I got it. There was a massacre. It happened, and I got the information. And I didn't know, why me? I can't do anything about it. And this is exactly what I was thinking. Why me? It happened a long time ago. It happened in 1850 about. And what can I do about it now? I was angry that this came to me because I had my test coming up. I had to study. I couldn't think about that, what happened, because there was nothing I could actually change about it. It had already happened, and what I did, I had to cut it out of my memory, kind of push it away. Like, I can't think about it, because every time I started thinking about it, I was crying. I was so distressed that I couldn't focus on anything, and I had to. So I cut it out of my memory, decided not to think about it, if possible, nothing. And so I let it be without understanding much more than it actually took place. I knew it took place. And I kept on doing my thing. Sometime in the year, beginning of the 1999, year later, beginning of 2000, I had an astrologer, a friend, astrologer friend of my friend, and he sent me this tape that told me what was going to happen to me in the year 2000. And I never had any money. But the thing said, the tape said, on the tapes, this astrologer said that I'll have so much money that by August I'll be able to buy the house. Well, I had no clue where that money would be coming from. But for the few years in the meantime, since I came to Reno, I was looking for a place, because in comparison to Los Angeles, where I lived before, houses were much less expensive. And I had this dream of having a home that would look on the Slide Mountain and Mount Rose. Just, I felt so connected to the area, and I loved it so much that was my dream. And I had an idea where it should be, that it would be like everyone at that time was buying houses around Arrow Creek area and on the west side, so west side by the Sierra Nevada range. I wanted to get something on the other side to have a good look on Mount Rose. Of course, I never had a home before. I didn't know anything about it. The whole process was unknown to me. But because it was, because of that prediction, I started to think about it. And one day, it was already in probably August, around August, I picked up a magazine, I think it was from Prudential Agency, and there was a place that looked like a little shack. It didn't look very good at all, but it had a very low price, and it said that there were views. So I called the agency, and I went, and they showed me the place. And it did have an incredible view, almost 360 degrees view. It was a very low price. It looked much better than on the photograph that was in the magazine. And it had a septic and a well. And so I got very concerned about that. I didn't know anything. I always lived in big cities, and the septic and the well was like, I don't know. So I wasn't sure what to do, and I waited a couple of weeks before doing anything. I was just, well, should I do septic and well, and I don't know. And then finally one day I go, I'm going to call and I'm going to see what happens. So I call. And the real estate lady who showed me the house, she goes, oh, I'm so sorry, but someone just made an offer and it was accepted. So I'm sorry. And at that moment, when I heard it, I had no idea that something like that could happen to me ever. I couldn't even talk to her anymore. I started sobbing so loud that I just put the phone down and I just kept on sobbing, and I couldn't understand myself, but I cried and cried and cried and cried and cried, still not quite understanding what happened, but I realized that, okay, the place was taken. And I couldn't imagine living anywhere else already. Suddenly it happened that I was so connected to that little house, and I lost it. So all I did was I cried. I also before I ended talking with the real estate lady. She said, you know, if anything happens with it, you're the first in line. I'll give you a call. So anyway, I tried. I looked at other homes. I looked probably at 12 other places in the meantime. It was crazy. It was just none of these places were ever. I didn't even want to look for a home. That was the only place I cared for. I didn't want to buy a house otherwise. These places didn't. Everything I saw was just not for me. So I kept on crying, and I also kept on stalking the house. I would drive up from one side and just in my car and just park my car in a place where I could look at it. And I would just sit there in my car and look at it. Then I would drive around from the other area and do the same thing and cry. And at the same time, I also started praying. And I windsurfed. So I windsurfed. At that time, Washoe Lake was full of water. It's like it is now, but there were years when it was empty, impossible to windsurf. But those years, there was water there, and I'd windsurf. So sometimes, whenever I would be coming back from windsurfing, I could see, it was the old 395. I would just look at that very place where my house was. I could see it there, my house. And I just look at it and look at it and say, oh, that's it. And then cry and cry and cry. What an idiot I am. How could I lost it? I'm a total loser, and on and on and on, and just cry and be just so unhappy. And then one day I was doing the same thing. I was driving from windsurfing from Washoe Lake and looking at the house, and then the slide mountain is on the left, right? So I looked at the slide mountain and I go, just like, please, just like you give me back that money that I lost. I don't want anything bad to happen to the people who bought the house. but please give it back to me. So I kept on doing that, kept on praying. My daughter visited from Poland because she lives in Poland, and I showed her the place the house that I lost. And when we were coming out that narrow, it's called Murphy Place, the street, it was still not paved at that time. Suddenly, we saw something on the road. And we got out of the car, and it was a tortoise, sitting right there. I've never seen a tortoise just wild here, but apparently they are. Not very often, but you can find them. So I looked what it meant in American Indian iconography, and it means good luck and prosperity. So we were very happy to find it. We put it on the side of the road. And so it went. Week, day after day, I just kept on praying and then praying less and crying less, and finally accepted the fact that I lost it. It's okay. 7 weeks went by, and I thought, I just stopped even thinking about it. And one day the phone rings, and it's the real estate people calling me. The same lady calling me said, I don't know what happened, but the people who were going to buy the house, it was a cash deal, they suddenly backed out. So I was the first in line. Of course, I didn't have any money. I scraped together $500 to make an offer. You have to have earnest money, you probably know. I didn't know that, but I had to have some money to make an offer. I didn't know how to make an offer, but I went there, of course. The next day I was there. And I was asked, so how much do you offer? And I had no idea what to say. So I just came up with a number, just like that. That was lower than the number that was, it was really inexpensive. That was $155,000, and I offered 148. And I said 148. Well, the next day the house was appraised for 148,000, and all I had to do was to come up with the money for the down payment, which was about 30,000. And so the next thing was to do that. I was selling my artwork, but nothing like 30,000. No, I was selling my cards. I was selling prints. I was selling paintings sometimes. But I was basically a starving artist ski bum. That was it. So I've asked everyone. I've asked everyone to buy my artwork. Everyone I met, and I managed to get something together, a little by little. I had a card. I would give my card to people I met and said, well, if you would like to, please call me. I have this artwork. Well, some people were totally uninterested. Some people bought something. I think I had 5 weeks to get together that amount. Well, by October 23rd or 4th or 5th, I'm not sure exactly which day it was, I was supposed to come up with all the money. And I was missing $20,000. And I never gave up. And this was interesting because I just said to myself, I just do whatever I can. I just can't give up. I can't give up. And it was 2 days before I was supposed to show up there with the whole amount that I get a phone call from a person who I met in a casino where I tried to make money and I lost it. And I talked to this one person there, this one guy, and I gave him my card and I said, you know, I'm buying this house, I'm buying this house. And would you like some artwork? And he said, well, I'll give you a call when I'm back in town, because he lived in Colorado. And that was that person. He said, he knew my story. I told him the story. And he says, well, you know, I have something for you. I'm not going to, I can't, I'm not going gambling anymore. I can't do it. It's just not my thing. He goes, no, I'll just have something for you. And I wanted to give it to you in a safe place. And I was at my place on Skyline Boulevard, and I knew the person was fine and harmless and everything, and I gave him my address, and about 15 minutes later he showed up. And it took about 2 minutes. He showed up, maybe 5. He showed up, he had a jean jacket on. He opened the jacket. In the sleeve of his jacket, he had a big blue envelope, the ones from the banks, you know, the blue one, big blue one. He took it out and he gives it to me, and he says, there's no strings attached here. If you ever have a chance to give it back to me, that's fine. If not, it's all good. No problem. Here it is. And he left. I didn't even open the envelope while he was there. He just left. And when I sat down at the table, and there was all this money in there, and it was exactly what I needed. It was $19,800. And again, it was like this sense of something being there, just like the time when we found the money on the hill. I realized that there is something that eventually, little by little, I connected everything. I got my house, and the next day after I got the house, I was completely broke. It was like $2. My money was all gone. Everything was gone. But I moved in on Sunday, November the 2nd, the 5th, actually, the 5th. It was signed on November 2nd. And Monday, the first thing I did with a friend of mine, we found big rocks on the property, and we put them in a circle in front of the house. This is for the spirits that gave me the house, because by then I already knew that from my house there is a direct line to the ridge, to Slide Mountain, and that's a portal. And I knew that I got that place to be a steward of that little piece of land. And I realized that one day I have to tell this story, because this is what they asked me to do. Little by little, as I was just living in my house. One day, that monument, I put a light in the middle, sometimes a candle, sometimes a light that was more, that wouldn't go away so quick. And one day I was just picking up rocks and for some reason putting them in a circle around that already bigger circle with rocks. And I hear the voice, and the voice is telling me, it's all about protection. And the words that I would hear would be not my words. This would be the words coming from the spirits. So in time there were more messages that I got from them. But I never, up until now, was able to get it all together to share the story with others. And I went to Alaska. I lived there for 4 or 5 years. I came back, and when I came back from Alaska, I think it was when me and Lindsay, we went for a hike, when we hiked up the gully that's facing east. And by the time we got not all the way to the top, I just could feel the presence so strongly. And I saw a vision there too of a white structure, and I could hear music, some voices, but it was just something that reminded me again that this is a time for me to finally get it together and talk about this, because right after I got my house in that summer, I was curious about this incident. I was curious about the massacre. I was curious what could have happened, so I looked for information about it. It happened that there were so many weeds all around the house, and I had some friends of friends helping me with weeding it out. And they were those two people that were friends of friends, lived in Franktown, right on the right, you know where Franktown is, right? So on the way to Carson, on the west side of 395. And these two people happened to be psychic. There was husband and wife. And I talked to them. He was working for the Virginia City Historical Group, I think it's called. And they both knew about the fact that the Washoes had those gray blankets, which I didn't know, but that's how I saw them. They had the gray blankets. That's what they told me. And also they told me that that they very often have visits of the chief of the chief of the village coming to Franktown, and there is his assistant there too. So they told me that, and then so I knew that it was true, but I was just trying to find connection with what other people know. And historically, there was an old plumber that came to help me with plumbing in the house. The house is very old, was built in 1964. And that old plumber, that was somebody that the real estate lady knew, he came, and by then he already was hard of hearing, but I managed to ask him, I said, do you know about any massacre that took place around Washoe Lake in the 50 or something? Have you heard about it? He goes, oh, yeah, I know. And he said that it was, sorry to say, the Mormon people who got there in, I think, 1849, and that was historically known that they would do that. To settle in, they wanted to get rid of anyone around, especially of native people who'd lived there. And the native people lived there for thousands of years. And they didn't consider themselves more important than the nature, like the Western man is. They were one with nature. And just like it truly is, everything to them is spiritual. And that's how they lived. And I have understanding of that. I understand, and I think you too can feel that the trees, the mountains, the air, the wind, the sky, these are all spiritual beings. And this is how the Washoe Indians, that's just the culture. It's a much more sophisticated culture than ours. Our culture is just based on this: material, emotional, and mental. And all that is the heart we have. We're trying hard to live with the heart, yeah, and we're doing better and better. But this is the heart dimension, this is the connection with the spirits that are always there. There's plenty of them everywhere. This is the vision and intuition, understanding, instant understanding of so many different concepts. This is where astrology, numerology, any kind of divination, tarot cards, or whatever other kind of divination is, that's the sixth dimension. And the seventh is connecting us with everything there is through just observing and discerning and witnessing. And the beautiful people who lived here for thousands of years, they were one with nature, and they were connected with the nature. And I'm here now, today, because I wanted to share this knowledge with you. Some of you already know that, but this is confirming confirming this very, very deep truth about life. And the truth is that all is spirit. This is spirit, and this is spirit, and consciousness is everywhere all the time, and we are beings that are created with the ability to connect to each of these dimensions. And as soon as the spirit, the individual unit of consciousness, the spirit creates this subtle body, it becomes survival, sexual, and creative. So we are all spirits that are perceivable to each other. We can see all there is through this dimension, through the material one. We can feel through the emotional one, and we can figure things out in a logical way through the third one. The rest of the dimensions is something that Washoe Indians and, of course, the American Indian culture knows about very well. So this is my message. I was really prompt the time after I came back from Alaska to finally create this event and share this story with you. I was thinking that maybe there is a way we could, through some initiatives, build a little monument somewhere for those that were not acknowledged after that massacre that took place. There are no records of it because no one would make records of it. Mormons would? No. American cavalry only made records of their own fights, say with Paiutes by Pyramid Lake. There are records of that. But if a bunch of Washoe Indians was murdered, no one would make a record of it. Their language is not a written language. Who would they announce that tragedy to? No one. So I was given that information. I'm sharing it with you. I don't know what else I can do, but I would love to be able to start some kind of maybe find a way to build a little monument commemorating them.